Hey, what's up everyone and welcome to my workshop. So in this video I'm going to make something that I wanted to make for a very long time, and that is my own replicas from some of the video games that I've enjoyed over the years. And in this video specifically I'm going to make something from my favorite Souls game of all time, which is Bloodborne. To me, the most iconic piece of equipment from the game is a Saw Cleaver, and I just think that it would be a very cool, memorable item to own in real life as a fan of the series. I really want the Saw Cleaver to be as accurate as possible, and I also want the locking mechanism to be fully functional. So this is probably going to be a pretty long and complicated project, but I think I have an idea on how to do those things. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first order of business is to cut down the plate that I ordered for the project into a more manageable size. The steel I'm using is a plate of AR500, which is a pre-hardened steel plate. And while it isn't necessarily made for blades, it is still going to be way more durable than, say, mild steel. And for a fancy build like this, that is in my opinion good enough. When you buy steel plates, they come with this thin but really hard layer called mill scale, and to easily remove this I put the plate in an overnight bath in some white vinegar, and this will help dissolve the mill scale. This will make it much easier for me to be able to grind the plate flat later on and get rid of that manufactured surface finish. And the idea is that I'm going to re-add some of my own texture later on and make it look more authentic. Whenever you're trying to recreate something specific, it's very important to have good reference to base your build on. And in this case, I'm using a printed, scaled up version of the Saw Cleaver depicted in the concept art of the game. And this is the most accurate 2D depiction of the Saw Cleaver that I have found. And it's important that it is a perfect 2D view of the item, because that would give me the biggest chance of making an accurate replica. Since we're not making the Saw Cleaver as thick as it is in the game, the most important perspective is the 2D view of the item, and that the silhouette of the Saw Cleaver is as accurate as possible. All of these straight lines that I've drawn here is a guide for me to use when I'm cutting this with the angle grinder. So yeah, there is a lot of cutting to do. What I'm doing here is I'm marking the bevel for the teeth, but I'm not actually going to grind a bevel that is this wide. What I'm doing instead is I'm grinding down kind of like a step, and this will give the visual illusion that the bevel really is this wide. And the reason for this is because in the game the item is incredibly thick towards the teeth area, and I only have 10 millimeters to work with here. And the entire idea with this is to make the blade look a little bit more visually interesting from the side and less flat. And this will make more sense whenever I'm sharpening the teeth and giving them a more three-dimensional shape. This is a normal Dremel used for sanding and carving things. And this is a Dremel on steroids. I will use this paired with some tungsten carbide rotary files to carve some more three-dimensional shape to the teeth on the cleaver. Alright, so I'm done with the main shaping of the blade of the Saw Cleaver, and this is what the handle is going to look like. And to make this handle, I'm going to use a pipe that I'm going to bend into this shape. You can't just hammer on a pipe to bend it, because that's going to make the pipe squashed and kind of flattened and really ugly, and I want to keep the pipe as round as possible to make it look very clean. And since I don't have a bending jig, I need to manually bend this, and to do that I'm going to mark up the length of this pipe evenly and then cut into the pipe and bend it that way, and then just weld it up again and then grind off all of the welds. So I'm going to mark up this pipe and then we're going to be cutting. Alright, so I have spent a unholy amount of time marking this pipe with even markings along the entire length. And the reason why I did so many of these is because I want a very smooth bend in the pipe. And if I have a wider section or a lot of wider sections, then when I bend that later on, it's going to be like a wider flat spot in the bend. And when I do this, I get the highest resolution on the bend itself. It's a lot more labor, but I want the result to be good, so that's why I'm spending extra time on this. And in case it wasn't clear already, what I have here is kind of a tiny section as like a spine on one side, and the entire other side is cut. And since there is two bends, the first bend goes one way, then I have the spine on this side. Then when the bend goes the other way, I have the spine on the other side. And this will allow me to do two different types of bends. I also quickly cut out a sheet metal template of the handle. And this is because if I had a paper template to put this pipe on whenever I'm welding it, that paper template will definitely start to burn and get disintegrated. And it's also really nice to have a more durable template to work from and not just a flimsy piece of paper, especially not when I'm bending this into shape. Alright, so I have tack welded all of the cuts now, and now I got the shape of the handle. So now I'm going to weld up all of these seams and hopefully keep the handle as straight as possible down this direction and not warp it badly. I finished making the shape for the handle. Now I want to make the actual hinge for the cleaver and make this functional. Now I don't want to change any of these silhouettes for either the cleaver blade or the handle, so I don't have a lot of surface area to make a functional hinge within, but I have made a cardboard design of how I think this is going to work. So there's a couple of pieces here that I need to make. So I'm going to make two side plates. They are basically going to sandwich the actual blade of the saw cleaver. And between the sandwich I need a spacer and then of course a locking arm. And in between these plates there's going to be a spring that activates this locking arm. That will then put the locking arm into the different slots in the actual blade. So to start making this, I need to cut out some side plates, two of these, a spacer and then a locking arm. I also need to drill a couple of holes in all these pieces. Both the blade and the side plates are made from the same hardened steel plate, and to be able to drill any holes in these I will need to anneal them by heating them up with a torch, and this will make them softer. With the correct equipment it is possible to drill holes in hardened steel, but with the equipment I have available I had to find a different solution. To make the hinge bolt for the saw cleaver, I'm going to use this already existing bolt and modify it a little bit by cutting off this section of the bolt and threading a portion of this so that I can make some custom domed rivet-like heads that I can screw onto either side of this. Those domed heads will basically sit on the outside of the side plates. One of the sides will have the dome welded onto it and basically replace this side of the bolt, and the other side will be able to unscrew. So let's begin with making the domed heads that's going to go on either side of this bolt. To make sure the domed nut doesn't undo itself, I need to make a locking screw. So basically I will have to drill the center of this hinge bolt and thread for a small screw, and this will make sure that the domed nut doesn't undo itself from when the hinge is moving. And the domed nut that is going to go on the opposite side is going to be welded onto the hinge bolt and then cleaned up so it looks like it is a part of the actual bolt. Alright, so now we need to cut out the locking arm for the hinge mechanism, but whenever you cut out weird shapes like this with the angle grinder, it's very hard to clean up all of these small radiuses and shapes. So I have thrown together a quick tool for the die grinder that will hopefully be able to help me clean up some of these smaller, trickier shapes. So basically the locking arm is going to be activated by this spring, and I need to fit this spring inside of this sandwich that is the hinge and have this be stuck in place and be able to put pressure on this locking arm. And that will in return put this like key into slots that I will carve out from the cleaver blade. These springs are wider than the slot in the middle. This is like 13 mil or something, and the slot in the middle is 10 mil, the same width that the cleaver is. So I need to carve a tiny relief from both plates on the inside to fit this spring in there. And I also need to somehow get the spring in there because this is going to be welded later on. And to do that, I'm planning on having like a carved tunnel essentially, so that I can put the spring into place, then put the arm down into position, put the bolt in, and that will allow me to essentially lock the spring into place in here while it's putting pressure on this arm. To fit this spring in here, I will need to carve out a little bit of material from the locking arm so that the spring has something to click into, and I will also do that on this middle plate that will go all the way up to here, and that will also have a relief for the spring. What I'm doing right here is I'm carving out a little bit of material on the inside of both side plates, and this is where I will put the cavity for the spring. I begin by carving down a line with the small tool on the Dremel, and this will allow the bigger tool to not slide around as much. The tool sliding around is especially a problem when using rotary files on steel and other metals, because the tool wants to grab onto the metal and then wander away, which can put nasty marks on the surface around where you're actually trying to carve. And using these tools to carve metal is a constant battle of trying to hold the machine in a death grip so that it doesn't fly away. With everything jigged up in its correct place, it was now time to tack weld the hinge components together. This is also the point where I permanently welded on one of the domed heads to the hinge bolt, and the other side is still able to unscrew so I can disassemble it. I ground some nice deep bevels in between the plates so that I have a place to put weld into, and then when I grind away all of the visible weld, there is still going to be a lot of material holding these together. I'm also going to do that on the other side and then round the edges so that it fits into the handle, and then I will weld up the entire thing. I didn't want these sharp corners on the locking levers, so I rounded them off with the grinder as well. Alright, so now it's time to add the handle onto the actual cleaver itself. So I have slotted the handle part so that it can slide onto the hinge part. And all I really need to do, I think, is to align the back spike with the center of the handle. And technically this should be in a straight line right here. There is no real good way to align everything properly and jig it up. So I'm just going to eyeball this to the best of my ability and hope that I get it straight. And then just tack weld it first and see how it looks. All right, that is pretty good. All right, let's fully weld this and then move on to plugging up the other end of the handle. Now with the entire handle done, I need to start working on making these 3 rings that are going to be attached to the handle. And to make those, I'm going to use this thick wall pipe that I had in my scrap pile. I will have to slice off 3 slices of this and then open up the inside of this pipe so that I can fit it onto the handle. And then I need to trim down the sides so that I get the correct sized ring. Now the handle is completed, and now we need to move on to attaching all of the detail to the handle. There is going to be 1 ring attached up here and basically meet the spike on the cutting edge from the cleaver, and then 2 more down towards the bottom of the handle. And to attach these rings, I need to bevel the inner radius on both sides, so I can weld them to the handle and then grind away all of the visible weld so they look like they are a part of the handle itself. So let's start with beveling these. The rings are now attached to the handle, and I have cleaned back the welding to make it look seamless. And now it's time to make the strips that's gonna go between these two rings on 4 sides. And I also need to make a bunch of the rivets that's going to go onto the strips of metal. And now I have drilled all of the holes that I'm going to plug weld. So I'm going to take all of these individual rivets, put them over a hole, flip it over, and plug weld it from the back side. I have now finished cleaning up the strips of metal with all of the rivets welded on. I also cleaned up the weld on the back side to make it able to sit flush on the handle itself. So now I need to attach all of these strips on to the handle And I'm going to do that with plug welds as well. So I'm going to drill some holes in between all of these rivets and plug weld them to the handle. I also need to attach the strip on either end to these rings as well. So there is going to be a lot of cleanup to do on this once I have welded it all together. So I finished cleaning up the welds that I did on the handle here, and this was very hard to clean up. These areas towards the rings was an absolute nightmare to clean up, but I'm pretty pleased with the result. I think this thing is starting to look incredibly cool, and I'm glad that I added all of this detail, even if I'm going to cover it up with some bandages later on. But anyway, now we're going to move on to the last steel components, which is going to be some thick steel wire that I'm going to wrap on 3 different places on the handle. I've ordered the wire that I'm going to wrap on the handle, and while I wait for that to arrive, I want to start working on carving out the notches into the cleaver blade that this locking arm is going to lock into. And I wanted to wait with this until the handle was finished and mounted on the actual blade, so that I know exactly where I need to carve out these notches. I don't want to mess this up because it's going to be very hard to fix any mistakes, so I'm going to take it slow and carve out the notches, one on each side. Right, so now it's time to carve the runes into the sides of the cleaver, but I noticed that on the concept art, the runes are much larger and in a different position than they are on the in-game model, and I want this to be as accurate as possible to the in-game version and not the concept art. So, with the help of Photoshop, I redrew the runes to match the in-game version much better, and I have printed out templates that I then will glue to the cleaver so that I can carve through the templates and into the steel. This is the template that I'm going to use to position the runes into the correct place on the cleaver, and this is just cut out so that I can align it perfectly with the contours on the cleaver to have the runes in the correct place. And this is a cutout that I've taped on here, and this is so that I can take the mirrored version, which will go on the opposite side of the cleaver, and I will just flip this template over and tape this in from the opposite side to then be able to do the other side. So it will be mirrored at that point. But I will only film one side. These runes are much wider than the ones on the necklaces that I did in my first video, so I will have to carve in from both sides until I meet in the middle to get a much wider V-shaped groove. So I will outline all of these first, and then I will work my way down from both sides. I have now finished carving the runes into both sides of the cleaver, and the final thing I want to do is to go in and add some battle damage to both the cleaver blade and the handle, as well as some of the components. I want to add some fake cracks and some scratches to make it look a little bit more ancient and battle-worn, and that's gonna really help me pop the contrast on this whenever I do the black oxide finish later on. I'm now going to use some gun bluing solution that I am going to put into this spray bottle, and with this I will be able to get a fine mist of the chemical so that I can spray all of the clean steel that I have on these parts. This liquid will chemically oxidize the steel to get a nice black finish. I will even use it on all of the smaller parts as well. First I'm going to clean off everything with some acetone and a rag to make sure there is no grease or dirt on the parts. This is the setup. I have put up the cleaver blade right now with some steel wire, and I will do first the blade and then I will do the handle later on, because you need to kind of wash off the chemical after a certain time. So I don't think I can handle both at the same time. And I need to mask up so I don't poison myself with this. So here I have some old linen cloth, and this is what I'm going to use to make the wrappings for the saw cleaver and the handle. And this is just some very rough structure linen cloth that I will cut some strips out of and then stain them in some instant coffee to make them look a bit more antique and rustic. Then I will probably have to sew together several of these strips from this and make one continuous long piece so I can wrap it properly. The black oxide came out great. I'm super happy with this. I even polished it back a little bit to make it look a little bit more worn. And now it's finally and literally time to wrap up this project with the bandages that I made earlier, and also some strips of reindeer skin that I'm gonna wrap on the handle portion back here. And I'm basically going to do a half and half spiral wrap on this section of the handle. And then on top of that, I will cut one of these strips into thinner pieces and wrap a more chaotic zigzag pattern to make it look a little bit more messy. And I will secure the wrappings with some string so they don't fall off. And I will use the shorter pieces of wrapping for the handle and the longer pieces that I sewn together on the actual blade. Well, here you have it, the Saw Cleaver Replica. Now, I am incredibly happy with this project. I think it looks amazing. It's just the coolest thing ever. And it was also a very fun project to do because there was a lot of like different types of problem solving involved, and I really enjoy that. Now, this is the first of many videos here on the channel of me making video game replicas, because I have a huge list of things that I would love to make replicas of. I definitely want to make something from the other Souls games and even other titles as well. And we might even revisit Bloodborne at some point. If you would like to see me make more video game replicas, then make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. And that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.